What's the last podcast you listened to?
Like literally
the last podcast you listened to.
You might know his name. This Indian dude. He's like a monk. He like a young monk.
Jay Shetty.
Yeah. I can't recall the
I
guest
fuck with
he had,
Jay Shetty.
but yeah, a friend of mine sent me an episode because that's what she happened to be listening to, and I listened to that on Tuesday, Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the guest name, but it was just along the lines of like designing your life. Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he's very much
being intentional.
Yeah, he's very much like that. He's another one of those like Tim Ferriss-ish guys. He's gonna interview very interesting people, but it's not gonna be your typical interview. It's gonna be more of like how do you? He's an interesting guy, and his podcast.
Do you know what it's called? The pod?
I think it's just called the Jay Shetty.
The Jay
Show.
Shetty. Yeah.
I don't know.
You know, it was that playing. Yeah, facts.
Yeah.
And he likes to get into like the science of things, like because people that he be having on the show be coming from like these backgrounds. So he be asking like you go learn too as a listener type shit. That's where he's coming from. So it was cool for first time that I just listened to it. It was cool. Yeah. What about
Danielle said her the last one she listened to was worst bestsellers. I haven't heard of that, but that actually just the title. It sounds interesting. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so many joints you see on the bestseller list that are just like, how did this end up on the best? That's what I think. That's what I think. Yeah, you can give us some clarification, but I feel like that's what it is. Speaking of the Let's Go to Court joint that she mentioned on the last one, I have been listening to that podcast Serial. You ever heard of it?
No.
It basically talks about like different crimes. It's like a crime podcast.
Like,
you know what I'm saying?
Really happened.
Yeah. So what they're talking about this season, though, the season that they're in.
Oh, it's one story
per season. Yeah.
Wow.
But they're talking about this guy in Baltimore who got arrested for he went sent away for life for essentially he was claimed to have killed his ex-girlfriend, but he didn't do it. And based on that podcast,
Ahmed Syed,
they're releasing him because of that podcast. Because of the podcast, they did this deep investigation on the podcast. And they're like, oh, this nigga might really be innocent. Yeah, because there was just so many testimonies about this is not the kind of guy he is, and it just so. I was listening to it on the way I went to Williamsburg.
How long?
I think they're.
So what I'm saying basically, when this season started, that's when the inquiry really started. Like if they didn't start this,
they probably wouldn't have been. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And this was the last season they just had.
All right. So every week they evaluate bad YA and romance novels. There's a segment where they vote on if the book is better with The Rock or Wolverine.
Oh, word.
Okay. All right. I think the two hosts work in library. Oh yeah, I feel like if you're a librarian, you're big on books.
For sure.
The last podcast I listened to, so this is gonna be not interesting at all, but I listened to this. So sometimes at night I listen to like sleep podcasts. I listen to like podcasts that help you sleep. You know what I'm saying?
But it's help you fall asleep. It's not like just.
I mean, it's on podcast services. It's on Spotify. Okay. It's on like Apple Podcasts. So that's where I listen to.
They be having new episodes.
Yeah, new episodes.
That's crazy.
But it's basically like it's people like talking in small and like low voices, and they're just saying like the things that you would like. There's like meditation, little meditative stuff. You know what I'm saying? So that's the last thing that I listened to.
Really talking to it, and you just listen to
nah. I'm not listening to niggas like talk to each other, but whispering. But it's and then it also just might be like calming sounds or whatever. That's the last podcast that I listened to. It was last night. But like if we're talking like real podcasts, the last one that I listened to was probably The Fantasy. I was listening to that yesterday, and then something along those lines. I listened to I'd be listening so like almost every day I listen to this podcast that basically tells you what's happening in the sports world. So like who's injured, who's it don't really tell you what's supposed to happen. It's called Daily Fantasy or Daily Fire, something I can't even remember the name. I just know I know it when I see it. I know the logo. But they'll have a joint for so what I used to do is during NBA they would every day just talk about like, okay, this team is playing this team and this is who's injured, and then they would move on. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so sick. It's like a 10-minute, 15-minute.
Anyway,
it's like a 10-minute, 15-minute podcast. You know what I'm saying? Just so you know like what's happening. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so that's I think the last one I listened to was for yesterday.
Early.